Hey, what is going on, guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'm reviewing the Nike Legend Essential 3 Next Nature. So 3 pros that I have with this model is number 1, the price point. So if you're looking into this model, it's likely due to the price point that comes attached with it. This model has a price point at $65 USD. So compared to other training shoes and compared to other Nike training shoes at that, this model is definitely one of the more budget-friendly models. This is the 3rd iteration in this line, and honestly, I think this is probably the best iteration to date. So I do like the price point for this model, and that takes me into my second pro, which is the overall performance of this shoe, especially for more general lifting and athletic style training. So I think if you're a beginner or if you're a little bit more intermediate with your strength work, this model will work just fine for you. You get enough stability in the shoe to do deadlifts like up to 315 pounds, squats up to 225 pounds. So when it comes to like lower threshold strength work, this model does an exceptional job. And then when it comes to athletic style training, this model's midsole is responsive enough for plyometrics, and you get enough grip out of the toe box and maneuverability to make this model comfortable for plyometrics and then also like sled work on turf. So when it comes to a decent all-around kind of budget-friendly shoe for indoor training, this model does a pretty good job. And then my third pro with this model is that I like all the updates that Nike made in the shoe. So with the Nike Legend Essential 2, 2 issues that I had with this model is number 1, the sole construction. It was a little bit subpar, wasn't the best for durability, and this model lacked arch support if that was something you needed in your training shoes. And then number 2, the upper construction was very subpar as well. It wasn't the most breathable and it wasn't the most accommodating when it comes to security for athletic style training. In the Nike Legend Essential 3, we now have a honeycomb mesh. It hugs the foot a little bit better, it breathes a little bit better. We also have a reworked sole construction, so we get a little bit more midfoot support in this model, and we have a new reworked outsole tread patterning. So despite still having some exposed foam, which I'm going to talk about in my cons, I do like the grip you get in this model a lot better, especially when it comes to indoor training. So I do like this model when it comes to the updates. It makes it a much more, I think, viable shoe for somebody who's a little bit more recreational in nature and trying to save money with their training shoes. But now let's talk about a few cons that I have with this model. So 3 cons that I have with the Nike Legend Essential 3 Next Nature is number 1, we still have a pretty narrow toe box in this shoe. So if you don't have a narrow width foot, so anybody with a neutral width foot or a slightly wider foot, you're going to want to go up a half size to a full size in this model. This model runs a little bit short too, in my opinion. Like, I've been training in these actually sockless because they feel best that way. When I wear thicker socks, they feel a little bit snug, so I should have probably gone up a half size. I have a neutral width foot, and the toe box I feel like could just be a little bit wider. You have that like typical tapered like athletic Nike toe box in the shoe, so definitely be forewarned if you have a wider foot and you're looking into this model. My second con with this shoe is that it's going to be an indoor only shoe in my opinion. You're not going to want to use this model outdoors because we have exposed foam here on the sole. Even just after like 1 or 2 sessions, I'm already starting to have the foam here cut on the medial side of the shoe from digging into my forefoot. So you're not going to want to use this model for daily wear or for running outdoors, especially if there is inclement weather, because that's going to break down this foam. So definitely keep this shoe as an indoor training shoe if you want it to go a little bit longer regarding its long-term durability. My third con with this model is that despite having this reworked sole and despite having a little bit more arch support in the shoe, I'm not convinced it's going to be enough for folks who really need a little bit more support on the medial side of their midfoot. So we do have a material here that comes a bit more into the midfoot versus like back towards the heel like in the Legend Essential 2. However, again, if you are starting to get heavier with your training and you notice that you're starting to have a little bit of a collapse here, I would not be surprised because we don't have any rubber here. We don't have additional support. So just something to keep in mind. I think it's a much better build compared to the Legend Essential 2. However, I would be remiss if I didn't mention it, especially for folks who do need more arch support. And if you are on the market for budget-friendly shoes, that would just be something to keep in mind with this model, because I don't want you to invest in it and then be like, well, still there's no arch support in the shoe. So while it is better, it's definitely not the best that you can get if that is something you need in your trainers. So when it comes to the performance of the Nike Legend Essential 3 Next Nature, I'm going to break this section into a few different parts. I'm going to talk about this model's performance for lifting, versatile training, shorter runs, and then daily wear. In the context of lifting, this model will be best for folks who are much more beginner in nature with their strength work. So I was working off the thresholds of like 315 pounds in deadlifts and 225 pounds in squats. When going heavier in this model, I started to have a little bit of compression. I wasn't a big fan of how the sole interacted with the ground. So I would say probably cap your lifting to those numbers if you plan to use this model for barbell training. For accessory work, this model will be just fine. And I think, again, if you are much more beginner or intermediate and you're not super specific specific with your strength goals, you're not pushing maximal loads, then this model can be a good option to explore. Plus, you do get enough grip on the shoe, I think, to make it a viable option for training on a bunch of different surfaces. So on turf, on rubber gym floors, this model's outsole does grip pretty well. Also on machines, it does a pretty good job with grip. I would just say be very conscious of this midfoot material here when you are doing like heavier leg presses or hack squats so you don't slip out. Make sure you have a good level of tread before you actually start executing heavier machine movements with the shoe, because we don't have a full rubber outsole. So again, for beginner and intermediates, this model will work for lifting, but if you are a lot more specific, or if you are very barbell focused with your training, I would say probably pass on the shoe and find something that will be a little bit better for the stability demands that you need. When it comes to versatile training, I actually really like this shoe, and honestly for 65 USD, I could see this being a viable like hit and class focused shoe, especially if you're much more recreational with that on a weekly basis. You do have a nice little layer of lateral support here for multi-directional work. The sole is pretty maneuverable despite being a thicker foam, and also you do get a nice level of grip with this outsole. Plus, we do have an outsole tread now that wraps and biases the medial side, so when it comes to really digging into the forefoot, I like that about this model, and it felt super lightweight and easy to wear for longer sessions. So if you want the shoe for versatile training, you should be fine in this model as well. Just again, be conscious of the midfoot here. If you do need more arch support, especially when you're jumping and doing like single leg work, that would be something that you might want to consider before investing in this model. When it comes to shorter runs, this model is just okay. Honestly, if you're gonna do like 1 or 2 miles indoors on like a treadmill before or after your workout, this model will work. I would say do not wear them outdoors. Again, you're gonna have faster breakdown if you do that due to the sole construction and the exposed foam, but it is comfortable enough to knock out 1 or 2 miles, especially if you're doing it much more casually for like a warm up or cool down. So in that context, this model will work. For longer runs, I would say probably pass on this shoe, find something that's a bit more specific. You'll also get more out of this model and you're not gonna break it down nearly as fast. When it comes to daily wear, honestly, this model is not really the best, and I would say probably pass on this shoe if you are looking for a model that you can wear all day and then to the gym. And that's for 2 reasons. Number 1, the toe box I think just gets a little bit uncomfortable for all day wear. I would rather have more width to where I can splay the toes and really grip the floor if I'm gonna be standing or walking for longer periods of time. And then number 2, with that exposed foam, once again, if you're wearing this in like inclement weather, that's gonna break this shoe down a lot faster. So if you're wearing them on your commute, for example, and it rains, or if it's muddy, that would be something that would make me a little bit worrisome with this model's long-term durability. But overall, I've enjoyed the Nike Legend Essential 3 Next Nature. Like, it's a $65 training shoe, so it definitely has its limitations, but if you are a beginner and if you are on a steep budget, this model could be a viable option, plus it's a step in the right direction compared to the Nike Legend Essential 2. When it comes to the price of the Nike Legend Essential 3 Next Nature, you can expect to pay $65 USD. So I think if you're on a steep budget, and if you're much more like beginner or intermediate in nature, when it comes to strength work and your gym sessions, this model will work. But again, like, it's $65 USD, so it will have its limitations. And if you're much more specific in nature with your training, you may want to look into a model that will better match your demands and needs in the gym. All right, so now let's answer the question, who should invest in the Nike Legend Essential 3 Next Nature? So if on a weekly basis, you are doing some general strength work, some HIIT sessions, some versatile training, and you want to save as much money as possible, and you're not planning to push your strength work super heavy, this could be a viable option to explore. Honestly, it's a pretty good general training shoe, especially for indoor sessions. And if you are, once again, on a very tight budget, honestly, for 65 USD, and if you could find these on sale for even less, I feel like they're a pretty good model to explore. Now, again, if you are specific with your training, if you are pushing heavier numbers, whether it be with a barbell, trap bar, etc., I would say pass on this model, find something that's going to be a little bit more suitable for your training needs, because this model will have its limitations and its long-term durability is certainly not going to be the best for its price point. So when it comes to the sizing and fit in the Nike Legend Essential 3 Next Nature, I think if you have a narrow width foot, go true to size in this model. If you have a neutral width foot or a wider foot, you're gonna wanna size up a half size to a full size. Now, for wider feet, you're gonna wanna go up to a full size, but for neutral width feet, I would say a half size should suffice for your needs. Once again, I've been rocking this model barefoot and it's actually felt really good. However, when I wear thicker socks, like, I would want more room in the toe box, so that is something to consider there. If I wear like thin no-show socks, I still want more room. So I do think going up a half size will be a safe call for a majority of lifters and athletes. But again, narrow width feet, you should be safe and true to size. Everyone else probably size up in this model. All right, so when it comes to the weight through the toe drop and insole in this model, for my size 10 shoe here, we have a weight of 9.05 ounces. The heel to toe drop in this model is not available. I reached out to Nike Sport Team. They also did not have a confirmation for me. It feels like similar to like 3 to 6-ish millimeters. So that would be my guess if I had to guess a heel to toe drop onto this model. And then this model doesn't have a removable insole. However, It's only held in with the light adhesive. I actually took this one out just to see. So if you do have your own custom orthotics or insoles, you could use them in this shoe. What I would suggest though is being very conscious of this volume through the upper here. If you have thicker orthotics or inserts, I would say probably pass on this shoe because I'm not convinced you'll have enough volume in the upper to make them comfortable for your needs. All right, so now let's cover the construction of the Nike Legend Essential 3 Next Nature. Up here on the toe box, we have an extended outsole layer that wraps up. It does bias the medial side here. I personally like this for grip when I'm pushing off the forefoot when I'm doing versatile training. It's a subtle detail that I think actually makes this model better than the Legend Essential 2 that had this like thinner lip right here. Looking at the outsole construction, we have a reworked tread patterning throughout the forefoot, lateral midfoot, and heel back here. We do have a rubber that wraps up on the lateral medial side of the heel. That adds a little bit of support, but I wish it was a bit more, especially over the forefoot, because that would prolong the midsole health here, because as you can see, it's starting to kind of already scratch up from training outdoors and wearing this outdoors for some walks. Looking at the midsole construction, we have a foam midsole. It's not the most stable, but at the same time, like you can lift some lighter to moderate loads in this shoe and get some stability. I would just say be conscious of how heavy you're going to be pushing in this model, because this midsole is not going to give you the most stability. It does wrap the entirety of the shoe. And then once again, on this medial side, this midsole comes up a little bit sooner through the midfoot, so you do get a tiny bit more arch support in this model compared to the Legend Essential 2 that had this wrap up closer to the heel. Looking at the upper construction, we have a honeycomb mesh throughout the forefoot into the midfoot. We have a synthetic layer here on the lateral side, and then back here on the heel, we also have like this synthetic material enclosing the boot as well. We have some Nike branding here on the medial and lateral side. And then looking at the midfoot construction, this has also been reworked from the Legend Essential 2. We now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 eyelets that go up with a 6 back here for lace lock. Overall, this lacing system I thought did a pretty good job for security. The tongue has a loop. Despite not being gusseted, I didn't have issues with this tongue security. That was actually something I was really curious about, because with Nike shoes that don't have gusseted tongues, typically the tongue can roll in, but I didn't really have that issue with this model, and I think that's because the tongue is a little bit wider and padded, so it helped with the overall tongue security you get with the shoe. Once again, this model does not feature a removable insole, but it's only held in with a light adhesive, so you can technically take it out. But that pretty much wraps up the gist of the shoe's construction. It's rather simplistic in nature, but if you have additional questions on this model's construction, drop a comment down below. All right guys, that wraps up my review of the Nike Legend Essential 3 Next Nature. Overall, I think this model is a step in the right direction for the Nike Legend Essential line, and honestly for general strength work and for general training, this can be a pretty viable budget-friendly option. I also like that Nike did use some sustainability in this model, so that is a perk of the shoe as well. But again, this model will definitely have its limitations. If you have additional questions on this model, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, drop a like on the video, drop subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.